But could we say that on one level, even the belief in God was kind of put aside because the church is closed, the sacraments were taken away. It's like we don't believe in what we should believe in.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people feel that the church's reaction was weak. I think they feel that way. And
Exactly.
the problem with the church is consciousness. The church still does not understand the term social engineering. They still don't
Mm,
understand what it means. Because if they did, they would have a whole different view of their own history in the United States of America, for example. So in America, I wrote a book called The Slaughter of Cities, Urban Renewal as Ethnic Cleansing. And in that book, I described how the Catholic neighborhoods were destroyed in America. It was the
mm,
government that did this. Well, the church, by and large, does not believe that. They have no explanation for what happened to them, simply on that basic level. Like,
mm.
how is it that there were so many big parishes with so many children going to Catholic school and so many vocations? And how is it that it's just changed overnight? Well, they don't have an explanation. And so as a result, they can't formulate a plan. And they still have a sense that America is a benign force in human history. They believe in it's called Americanism. It was even a heresy that was condemned by Pope Leo the 13th.
Yeah, yeah,
They don't understand that this regime was the enemy of the church. They don't understand that. And so they have difficulty coping with this latest crisis. And the classic example of the failure to cope is the Jesuits in America. They have a magazine called America, which is significant. And they had articles. One article was, I am a scientist. We must close down our churches. That is a complete acceptance of the dominant oligarchic narrative. Complete acceptance of that, even to the point of shutting down your own worship services. James Martin, who is probably he's the main promoter of homosexuality in the Catholic Church. He gets an
oh
audience
yes,
with Pope Francis I at the drop of a hat.
yeah,
He has gone on, I believe it was Fox News, saying we should not open the churches. Well, you're seeing the same thing that I just mentioned. If your life revolves around promoting homosexuality, you are at war with nature. If you are at war with nature, then you feel very vulnerable. You need the big state to protect you. You don't feel that the church can protect you because you've abandoned all of the principles that the church is based on, including especially the moral law, which is your primary protection in life because
yeah.
it tells you how to act. That's the problem with the church. The
And
church simply the church, to make a long story short, has internalized the commands of its oppressors. That's the problem.
yeah, and I want to talk to you about moral law, but before that, I want to ask you: do you think what we're talking about right now is the consequence of FMS Church, or do you believe the church was infiltrated, or maybe both?
What was the first thing? What did you
The
say?
FMS Church, so the feminine church, that the church is feminized from the bishops, priests, seminaries.
I think the main problem is Americanism. I think America
You
after
think
World War II.
globally?
Yes, I think that America after World War II became a global power. And
Mm,
the Achilles heel of the Catholic Church is always reliance on princes. So even a figure as great as Saint Jerome, could not conceive of the church without the Roman Empire. When the barbarian invasions started, like the Battle of Adrianople, that type of thing, he thought it was the end of the world. Well, the church has always done this. There was a certain time when the church it could not conceive of existing without France as its protector. And then France turned on it with the French Revolution. And then we
mm,
have the 20th century, and you have the rise of communism. And suddenly the Catholic Church feels, well, we'll never survive communism unless we have America protecting us. This is always a problem. It's always been a problem with the Catholic Church. There was a time when the apostles felt that if we didn't have the Mosaic law, how are we going to survive without the Mosaic law? That's the end of the world. It's chaos. Well, we're now in a position where the church has to separate itself from the American empire, because the American empire has become the main enemy, not just of the church, but of the world. I mean, it is the main source of chaos in the world right now.
Yeah, and I mean, no offense, but I think that the Americanism is like the paragon of everything degenerate that could. Maybe there are a few degeneracy coming from Japan, but I think they're mostly under influence of Americanism.
Yeah, Japan is a conquered American colony.
Yeah.
So they have no independent existence of their own. So you're right. It is the main problem right now. How is the church going to deal with the American empire? Well, then the question is, well, what is the American empire based upon? And it turns out it's science. And so, and because it's based on science, they can operate in contact with ultimate reality. And so what you saw here was the church completely capitulating to that understanding. It's implicit in that article that I told you about in America. I am a scientist, therefore we must close our churches. Well, if you're a scientist, I can't argue with you. You have absolute truth on your side. What am I supposed to say? And so the bishops just throw up their hands and they say, well, we'll do whatever the scientists tell us. And so you have this ridiculous spectacle of people wearing face masks in church. They're 6 feet apart. They just reopened the churches here. It's enough to make a grown man cry. You know, I'm not trying to play down the existence of this thing, but I think all of the evidence indicates now that it's past, and they're basically closing the barn door after the horse is out.
Is the science a new God?
Yes, of course it is. If one thing I cover in this Logos Rising is the conflict between science and religion. You've always had this conflict about who speaks for ultimate reality.